We're now starting the last movement of the Vivaldi Concerto. This looks very much like the first movement. It has the same combination of eighth notes and sixteenths. It has a lot of the same patterns, like the three-note groups. And the repeated eighth notes. So it would be very reasonable to play it with the same tempo and the same feeling as the first movement. Fitting right into the same groove. And that's okay. It's quite acceptable. But an artist wants to know, what is special about this movement? How is it different from what we've already heard? We need to look for something in the music that demands to have a certain feeling and a certain tempo. Very often, it's not right at the beginning. It'll be some little passage in the middle of the piece that will jump out at us and give us that crucial clue. How about this? That has a lot of personality. It's playful, and it has some singing quality, and it needs time for that to happen. If we play it too fast, it loses its character. So, now we have an idea about the tempo, a little slower than the first movement, and it has a different feeling. Let's plug the opening into that tempo. Bum, 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 bum. We need to find a good sound and a good bowing style. We've already talked a lot about bow strokes. I would start this movement with an accented détaché. Long notes and very energetic with a big full sound. And not too fast. The notes need some length. That gives it the soloistic quality that it needs. If the notes are too short, it becomes kind of choppy and unattractive, like this. On the other hand, we don't want it to sound bland like this. So here's our bowing style, accented détaché. How would you describe the feeling of this movement, or the mood of this movement? For me, it feels grand. It has nobility. That's very different from the first movement that kind of bounced along happily. So now we have an idea. We have an interpretation. Grand. Noble. Now the phrase is repeated. Piano. This is actually one of the few dynamics that Vivaldi wrote into the score. So, for the piano phrase, I use a lot less bow, maybe 2 inches of bow. And also I play more staccato. So this time it's more of a martelé bow stroke. A lot of students neglect the rests. If you're one of them, I've devised a special exercise for you. Here it is. You see what I've done here? I've added some notes to fill in the spaces. You can download this exercise and print it out. Now, let's go on. Let these eighth notes sing with long bow strokes and vibrato. That's the soloistic sound. We use one of my favorite techniques in this passage, finger substitution. This is a great way to make those one-position shifts. It's actually a crawl rather than a shift. Practice it this way. Second finger, third finger, 2, 3, 2, 3. Back and forth. Then the other fingers adjust to the new finger pattern. If this is new to you, it'll take some getting used to, which means it'll take some practice. It's worth it. You'll use this technique thousands of times. Finger substitution. Now we have the three-note groups again, just like in the first movement. Here at measure 23 and 24, I play these measures with separate bows. Not like this. That spoils the style. Now, how about an easy half-step shift to fourth position? Now we have an embellished version of the first theme. This turns into this. And this turns into this. The second time, we can play it piano. Even though Vivaldi didn't indicate it in this place, we follow the pattern that he established at the beginning of the movement. Forte and piano. And we also changed the bowing pattern to make it even more interesting, violinistically speaking. Do you recognize this bowing pattern from the first movement? That's the one that Beth explained in great detail in this passage. Now, let's talk about phrasing. Listen to the way this phrase ends on the downbeat. End. And then the next phrase begins on the offbeat, just like the beginning of the movement. And again it ends on the downbeat, and the next phrase begins on the upbeat. And again. And again. Here's measure 47. Ending the whole section on the downbeat. And the next section begins off the beat, just like the beginning. We're at measure 55 now. The editor asks for this passage to be played dolce e lusingando. Do you know what those words mean? Dolce. That's a very common musical term. It means sweetly. And lusingando, that's a good one. Flattering, coaxing, intimate. The bowing pattern makes it happen. Otherwise it would sound like this. That's not Vivaldi's bowing, by the way. It was put there by the editor. If you want to experiment with some other bowings, that's perfectly okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's what an artist does. Now let's jump to measure 75. It's one big A major arpeggio for 2 measures. Climbing. And arriving at this G. That's the goal. The G changes the harmony. It makes it into a dominant 7th arpeggio, which wants to go someplace. It wants to resolve to that F sharp, which introduces the next arpeggio, the D major arpeggio. Going to the C. Again, making it into a dominant 7th arpeggio, which wants to resolve to the B. Now we go to 2nd position. First, practice the shift. This is almost like the finger substitution we practiced earlier. Then we continue on up the scale. Do you recognize that this is just a basic C major scale in the easiest scale pattern starting on the 1st finger? We have 8 notes, 2 groups of 4 with the same finger pattern. It's a 3-4 pattern with a half step between 3 and 4. And we have a frame, the 1st finger and the 4th. On both strings, the 2nd and 3rd fingers fit right into this frame. We've gone back to 1st position. And back to 2nd, and there's that same frame again. The 1st and 4th fingers in the same place they were a moment ago. That's a nice little reminiscence of the 1st movement. Let's jump ahead to measure 109. Let's find the framework for this passage. Those are the melodic notes. You might want to circle them in your music like I've done here. The open E's are just adding color. This kind of violin writing actually has a name. It's called bariolage. We find it all over the place in Baroque music. And you know where else we find it? In fiddle music. You can start practicing this passage slowly, like this. And then in pairs, like this. And in groups, like this. And like this. and then eventually. So, we've come to the end of my video segment on the last movement. Beth will take over now. Please leave a comment or a question in the comments box. And please get out your violin and try some of these ideas while they're fresh.